I read the economic survey a little late, but nonetheless, here are my 2 bits about it. The economic survey, of course, wants to paint a really rosy picture, but it ends up exposing the fault lines that exist in India's economy and the world of finance. Let's begin with the growth rate projections. The economic survey says that in fiscal year 27, which is next financial year, India's GDP growth rate is likely to be 6.8 to 7.2%. Mind you, this is going to be lower than the estimated growth rate of this financial year. The potential growth rate for India is being talked about at 7%. That's point number 1. Point number 2, the survey highlights the geopolitical risks that exist. It talks about the external environment and says India needs to be cautious. The survey finally admits that the rupee has been falling, but of course blames it on every factor other than domestic factors. It talks about an external environment which is not suitable. It admits that the drying up of the foreign capital inflows poses a very serious threat to the rupee. It also talks about the fact that net surplus from the services sector and the remittances will not be able to offset India's huge trade deficit. So acknowledging here that trade continues to be a big problem with no trade deal in sight. Again, it talks about India's corporates. It actually tells them that you should invest more, you should create more jobs, and also puts out a number that Indian firms outbound FDI, the amount of money that Indian firms are investing overseas, went up from $14 billion to $25 billion. It talks about manufacturing, puts the number at 12.8% of the GDP. Please remember the target was 25%. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But manufacturing is still contributing only 12.8% of the GDP. It talks about a major economic risk, which is AI valuations overseas and everywhere else, and says this could result in a 2008-like economic crisis. It talks about India's class 8 students dropping out and the need to retain them in schools. Again, something that we'll just speak about in a bit. It talks about maize, pulses, cereals, and their average yield being lower than global averages. It talks about traffic and expensive houses being a huge impediment to development. And of course, it talks about a policy reshape as far as the gig workers are concerned. But let's begin with growth. What exactly are we celebrating? I've heard everybody celebrate the growth momentum. What are we celebrating? A sub 7% growth rate or a 7% growth rate? The reality is that India will need to grow at 8.2% every year for the next 21 years if we want to be Viksit Bharat by 2047. That's a reality you can't look away from. That's point number 1. Point number 2, there is a problem with numbers. If fiscal year 26 real GDP growth is expected to be at 7.4%,